I'm just trying to see how many we've got online at the moment. 1 second. Okay, people are starting to come online. I'm just watching the numbers roll, so just give me a sec. Just watching those numbers come online. Morning, Jade.
Good morning.
Okay, we've got a minute to go. The numbers are still climbing slowly. We'll start bang on 11. Okay, Raul, are you ready? Great.
I am. Are you going to do a little introduction?
Yes, I will, certainly. So good morning, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming online again to join us in our part 2 of yesterday's Path to Market webinar series. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm Glynis Miller, and I head Pacific Trade Invest New Zealand here in Auckland. I will be your facilitator again today. Today, we have a powerhouse of presenters, all leaders in their respective fields, who will speak to relevant topics throughout the day. In keeping with webinar protocols, comments and questions are welcome, so keep them coming in, please, and we will make all attempts to answer them throughout today and post-webinar. To begin, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Raul Sarot. Raul runs his own marketing business, Fresh Fish, a boutique studio. In line of his business, Raul helps businesses with their branding, brand strategy, communications design, and other tailored services to help SMEs reach their strategic goals. Raul is also a senior lecturer in a variety of design-related papers at AUT here in Auckland. His international experience has been forged over 30 years working alongside a wide range of commercial and not-for-profit enterprises in Asia Pacific, South America, and Europe. Welcome, Raul. The floor is yours, and you have 10 minutes to conclude your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kia ora, good morning. Malolele, talofa, lava, kia orana. And I'm possibly missing a few, but good morning, everyone. And thank you, Glynis and PTI for inviting me yet again to be part of this briefing. I have a lot to say in a very short period of time, so I will try to be jumping on my presentation. So I will share now my screen. Let me share the screen. Can you see my full screen, or can you see 2 screens or 1 screen?
We can see 2, Raul, so maybe just...
yeah, I will share that.
Yeah. Just take it back to the 1 screen function. Yep, perfect. And...
why is it? What about if I do this?
And go to full? Nope.
You still see 2 screens. Oh, that's weird. Anyway, let's see if there's any other view. I can do this.
Yeah.
Will be just slide only. All right, that'll be.
Oh, great. Yep, all good.
So welcome everyone, and thank you. We are going to talk about fresh branding. Well, of course, on brand with our business, which is called Fresh Fish. But let me introduce, let's see how we can change slides, not being in presentation mode, which will be interesting. Okay, I might need to show this to be able. Well, anyway, hello, my name is Raul Sarot, and as Glynis briefly introduced myself, I help companies succeed, so achieving what you guys are after, your dreams or expectations around your business, through a few things, and this is very important. First, understanding your value, then building your value, and then communicating your value through design. And so we will talk today quite a lot about value, but let me firstly explain what our business does. So we work in three basic components. One is strategy, which is around your vision, your purpose, helping you define your personality, how you're planning to create value, and that's again the word value, your brand story, understanding customers through research, and defining perhaps channel strategy. Design, that all needs to come visual at some stage, from the world of thoughts and concepts into the tactile world of visuals. So we work on brand identity and brand communications, of course, packaging being one of them, online presence like websites or social media and point of sale in any retail floor that you might choose. And communications could be a communication strategy, understand those channels, advertising, copywriting, etc., etc. So out of these key components of what we do, there's one particular one that is important, which is value. And not only the value from a money financial point of view of value, but the value that you are going to create in your ideal audiences. Say, if you're thinking of potentially expanding into a New Zealand market or other international markets, I understand you are already. Why value matters, and that's the point of today, really, that I would like to make an emphasis. So a product is only successful if it adds values to someone's life. And I'm not saying it's going to be life-changing, but I'm saying you can provide a moment of pleasure, a day of pleasure, a week of delight, an instance of something. Being a product or a service doesn't matter, doesn't need to be food, can be wearables, can be services, technology, whatever. Are you going to add value to that person or to that group of persons in any moment of their life? And that's a shift in your mindset, in a way, understanding that it's not only about you and what you make, that possibly you're really good at it, and what you make it with, that possibly you're really good at it too, and where do you make it? That could be a huge story where you're coming from, right? Each one of the stories of your source, of your provenance, of your lands could be something that adds values, but you need to understand if that is meaningful for someone else. So value, if it sits in the middle, there's two things here. There's rational benefits and emotional benefits. So one is what people will think, and the other one what people will feel. And understanding that you need to shift and understand the other side of the equation, your buyer, your consumer, your user, is an important part. And that's part of what we work on with you, to understand that your brand is only going to be successful if it builds value to your customers, but also to your stakeholders. That could be you, your family, your whānau, or investors. So the value goes both ways. It's not only one way. And that's important. So how do you build value, and how do we build value together? So one thing that we say is the value is the magic moment in between you and them. So if you find that magic moment that is between your offer and their needs, then we're in a good place. This could be their needs or their wants, because it doesn't necessarily to be something they need, but something that actually they want. But it's important to understand that it's not about your offer, and it's not just about their needs. It's that magic moment in the middle. So, you know, it's around, do people want it? Is it desirable? Is it viable for you to produce, and feasible, right? From a financial point of view. So from a path to market point of view, it's important that from the strategy, so the conception to the design, to the shelf, to the consumer hands, there's a journey. And there's a journey that is not hard, that is hard and will take time to develop, and budget to develop. And that's also, we were just talking with Glynis just before, it's important to be realistic of what you can afford or where you're at now, and make a strategy that will give you steps to grow. So it's really important to have a reality check of where you're now. Are you underdeveloped in the brand world? Are you understanding what building value is? Are you developing that value, or are you mature? And of course, if we say that product is king, I saw that in my presentation was that I need to talk about the 4 Ps. So let's talk about the 4 Ps, because it is important, which is the traditional marketing model around 4 Ps: product, price, promotion, and placement. So of course, this is still super relevant, but this has been around for the last 50 years, really. So, you know, there's people that think, okay, this is fundamentally, this will create part of the difference, but also is around the 4 Cs. And the 4 Cs is understanding your customers, and the cost component, the communication, which is now called also community building, and the convenience for them. So this is saying that the 4 Ps of traditional market, which is understanding the basics of how you do business, it's also adding a customer point of view that will shape your business. So if value is king, good branding is the kingmaker. So the branding is the vessel of the communication between you and your customer. And so it's really important to pay attention to it and to embed it as part of your model. So when you conceptualize and start thinking around expanding and growing your markets locally or regionally, and expanding to new markets like New Zealand, brand is the opening key to that. So you need to really think about your customer. Mostly, if you're, this is a great little example here. On the bottom left, we have your current product in your current market. If you move horizontally on the bottom, you have your current product in the new market. Say if you're going to launch in New Zealand, but a new market means a new consumer. If you go up, you might go, oh, I might launch a new product in my current market. Or ideally, I would like it perhaps consider to have a new product in the new market, because you understood that your product needs to perhaps change or be adapted to that market. So it's really, really important. And I would like to talk about, I know you all come from very, very different industries, very different backgrounds, different stage of maturity. But so I would like to talk about something before as a little quick case study. And it's really important that you understand that these days brands are digital as much as they're physical. So you might sell something like an egg, right? Which is the perfect example of packaging, how the beautiful, example of how something could be packaged. But however, that egg will come packaged somehow. And there's a lot of storytelling happening in actual, excuse me, packaging, and people are trying to be really innovative around how to pack eggs, how technology and design can help make them not only safer or more durable, but more attractive. And there's a lot of how, okay, perhaps we can do multi-packs and be more consumer interesting, but there's something interesting. Consumers are asking for certain things. Trends in the industry are asking for, hey, we want to be more sustainable. We want to take care of the earth and be, for instance, organic. So that is shaping the industry. But it's not only you buying an egg, but you having this beautiful packaging, but it's also about the digital world. And when you get into traceability, for instance, and sustainability, on the bottom right, you will see egg stamping. Okay, can I see where that eggs come from? So that's where the brand story is fundamental, and something that you also have in mind, and we can help working with you on that aspect. So it's not just about the egg or how you're going to eat the egg in a beautiful setting in the morning, perhaps, but where is that egg coming from? Am I actually happy eating that egg that is coming from here? Not really. Oh, perhaps I'm happy as something a bit more sustainable, that I know they're pasture fed. Or is it the sole chicken in the middle? Oh, but I still see a barn on the bottom. Can I see perhaps little individual houses and I feel good about that this farmer is doing something for me? So some quick stories to share to wrap up in 2 minutes my presentation. I hope it's not so too convoluted, trying to say too many things in a short period of time, is that a few years ago, a few case studies, we worked with a company, a lady doing lemon juice up in Kiribati in the North New Zealand. And she was doing really well selling locally. She saw an opportunity to perhaps sell in supermarkets. She started packing her lemon juice from her orchard, and then she decided that was going too well and she needed to outsource more lemon but still keep it natural. So we worked with her in the packaging, and that worked really well, but still we understood that people needed to understand the value of those little parcel of lemons, these little packets. So by actually bringing it to life through photography, through storytelling, it's really important. So this is part of the exercise we do, try to find value in what you do. In some other cases, it's trying to understand how your portfolio, for instance, another brand that we work here, how your portfolio could work for New Zealand audiences. Not long ago, this was last 2 years ago, we went to Samoa and to help some companies try to, sorry if it's something shows on my screen, a little communication, to Samoa, to help Samoa Pure Water, a lovely family doing a lovely business. And they were ready to launch in New Zealand, but we identified that perhaps there are steps to grow into New Zealand that needed to be taken into consideration, and there were opportunities in the local market and regional market first. We are working with Rito Cook Islands, which are also growing and understanding the importance of branding, but also digital storytelling, through making a website that brings your brand and your brand story to life in a beautiful way that is meaningful to the audience that you are talking about. And lastly, I would like to talk about a company that we are working on the Solomon Islands, which is called Soltuna, and we design a range specifically for New Zealand and Australia, taking the best of the existing ranges, but understanding their value in the market at the moment. And again, the idea of storytelling and the provenance of where you're coming from and how are you adding value. So just to make my presentation short, we are happy to help in different areas of your business. It's important that you embed in your strategy the idea of your brand story and where you come from, and the idea that you will create, you need to create value. And for that, it's important that you understand that consumers and users in different parts of the world and specific countries or in specific regions will have different perceptions of your brand. So tell your story, find your value, and understand your audience. So that's it for me. Happy to talk and expand, happy to answer some questions now if you have any. And thank you very much. Feel free to connect. There's my email and my phone there. And kia ora, and hope you have a beautiful day and a beautiful session. And thank you again, Glenis, for the invitation.
Oh, you're most welcome, Raul. I think the pleasure is ours, having you join us this morning. What a inspirational presentation, and I just loved the case studies and some of the examples of the work that you've done across the Pacific Island countries. I'm sure your message around good branding, being the kingmaker, I like that statement. And I think hopefully those online with us this morning will reach out to yourself through the contacts that we will, your contact we will share to pose their questions to you. And I'm sure, and hopefully that through this path to market, you will be able to connect with those who have signed on to this path to market. So Raul, if you do have time, we don't have any questions come up for you at the moment, but we may after the following session. So you're most welcome to stay online. And if you...
minutes, and happy to answer questions while you present the next presenter for the next 5 or 10 minutes, and then I will leave you guys.
Thank you very, very much, Raul. Okay, so right, so again, thank you, Raul. So we move on to the next session, is where we get to hear directly from one of New Zealand's leading importers and distributors of fresh produce. Jave Reeves, welcome. Javes is the imports manager with Emg Marketing here in New Zealand. Procuring, sourcing fresh produce internationally falls under Jade's responsibility. He has worked for Emg Marketing for over 21 years. Jade brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the role, and we're extremely fortunate to have someone with a depth of knowledge and experience in key account management, warehousing, logistics, procurement, and supply, joining us on our Path to Market webinar today. He is also currently the chair of New Zealand Fresh Produce Importers Association. Today, Emg Marketing is a cooperative representing over 400 grower stakeholders. Jay, today you are addressing growers, exporters of fresh produce from a number of Pacific Island countries. Maybe you already do business with some of them, who knows? Others online are from other manufacturing sectors, business owners, company directors, government officials, and the list goes on. Welcome, Jay. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Glenys, and thank you everyone for having me today. I'll just get the presentation up. Right, so today I'll be talking to you about who MG is and also where I see some of the opportunities for many of the Pacific countries to maybe provide some value to the New Zealand market and how to better access the market. I thought I'd start with a little bit of history about who Emg Marketing is. We are a growers cooperative, and we started in 1923, so nearly 100 years ago, when there was a small group of growers in Wellington were looking for a better way to market their produce. So they formed Emg Marketing. Today, we now consist of, as Glenys said, 400 shareholder growers, but we actually transact for about 700 growers, both in New Zealand and abroad. We sell an extensive range of fresh fruit and produce. We like to think we do everything from A to Z that's available, but I'm sure there's potentially many growers here that would have some options that would help us extend our range. Outside of our core fruit and produce wholesaling business, we also own or have involvement in several subsidiaries, including a business nearly identical to our own in Australia. We've got exporting businesses operating out of New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. We have New Zealand's largest flour wholesale and auction house, and we have several corporate growing operations here in New Zealand and in Australia. A couple of things about us, a few facts on what makes us different is, as I said before, we've been around 100 years, and many of our employees and many of our relationships are decades old, and we'd like to think that's a testament to the quality of service and professionalism that we provide those growers. We are New Zealand's largest supplier of fresh fruit and vegetables and New Zealand's largest importer of fresh fruit and vegetables. We work with all the major retail and food service operations in New Zealand. And as I said before, we pride ourselves on our extensive range, and that's an area I hope you can, some here can help us with. We're across all areas of the supply chain. As I said before, we're vertically integrated right from growing, warehousing, sales, and distribution. Our national network, this is our footprint here in New Zealand. We have 9 physical locations. They provide warehousing and sales avenues for us throughout the entirety of New Zealand. It's one of our advantages. But outside of that, we also have 2 virtual branches, if you like. And what they do is they currently meet the needs of some of our larger chain customers where they can access through us almost like a direct to DC platform, and that has changed quite a lot of our business and given us additional capacity to manage more stock. Our global network, we're currently working with multiple growers across about 17 countries, and it spans a really extensive range. We're in all the mainstream commodities that you're probably aware of, things like bananas through Dole, grapes, citrus through the likes of Sunkist and some of our Australian partners, but we're also into some of the niche stuff too, like dragon fruit, mangosteen, and lychee. A lot of the relationships we have been cultivated over many years, but at the same time, we're finding each year there is new opportunities to establish new relationships, and New Zealand's palette is changing. And with those changes, there is demand for a more diverse range of products. Some of the things that we really focus on, not only in our international programs, but also in our domestic programs, is we really want to bring quality products consistently to the market and adapt to the changing palette of the New Zealand consumer. So I really can't emphasize enough the need to focus on what would be commercially grown, good quality product. And if that can be achieved, then the sales opportunity in New Zealand is exponential. A couple of things that are important when thinking about entering the New Zealand market is around the need to meet some compliance and sustainability requirements. As with many global businesses, we have some requirements around food safety, worker care, and sustainability. These are not a nice to have, they're a must for Emg Marketing, but they're not, in many instances, they're not only a must for us, they're also requirements of either the New Zealand government and or our customers that we supply. All our international suppliers to Emg Marketing, at the very least, and probably to most other importers of fresh produce, is we expect our suppliers to have at least one internationally recognised food safety quality assurance certification, something like HACCP, Global Gap. Those types of programs are really a necessity to enter the market here. Most of our customers require that we can provide evidence of that certification for the suppliers that we're providing them with. And something that will come to the fore in the coming years is the requirement also to show that not only are we meeting the food safety requirements around compliance, but also we're meeting the requirements around responsible sourcing, things around how the environment's being taken care of. And there's a lot of interest now in how workers are being valued and treated within the supply chain. Now to what I hope might be a bit of the stuff that's a little bit more relevant to establishing some business connections. The New Zealand customer base is made up primarily in produce of the major supermarket chains have a really large hold over the market. We work along with all the major supermarket banners from the Foodstuffs Group, Niue, Pack and Save, Foursquare, Gilmore's, the Raywood Freshers. We work with Progressive and Countdown, but also the Fresh Choice and Super Value Group. That's one segment of the market. Then there's another segment that has different requirements and needs around the variety of product, but also the quality of the product, which would be our food service providers. We work with all the major food service providers, also our local independent retailers, and some of the smaller food service businesses in our regions. And we supply right down to the flea market and weekend markets here in New Zealand. So we really are across the whole spectrum of customers. Where I think that there's, in the presentation here, you'll see there's some commodities that are listed. I've gone through the New Zealand Import Health Standard to identify in the Pacific Islands some commodities where I think there is the low-hanging fruit, where there is opportunity. Some of them are seasonal, like the limes, melons, eggplant, avocado, sugar pea, chili, and courgettes. And then some of them would enjoy a longer window, the likes of the mango, pawpaw, ginger, and taro. These commodities on this list, many of them, some of them are already imported into New Zealand, but many of them aren't imported into New Zealand from the Pacific. Yet there are import health standards for a lot of countries for them. And with the challenges around shipping, biosecurity management in some countries, these will become more relevant. And I do believe that with the global freighting issues, the Pacific Islands are becoming more a viable option for some of the supply. The real key around the supply is getting to a scale where it's viable to supply New Zealand, and also to compete on the international market. Things like ginger, in particular, taro, pumpkin, watermelon. The reason they work well out of places like Tonga and Fiji is because they're able to be loaded on as sea freight consignments. So they can compete against the likes of the Thailands, the Philippines of the world, where they also can produce vast quantities. Things like limes and mangoes, though, air freight is, and snow pea too, air freight is the only real viable option, but there is demand and capacity here in New Zealand to take more. And one of the things we are seeing is demand, particularly for mangoes, is growing exponentially as I mentioned before, as our consumer tastes change. When coming to the market, it's one thing to have the product. The next thing is to make sure that your country is able to export these products, but also that you are meeting the biosecurity requirements to have them cleared into New Zealand. Information around that, around MPI and what the clearance requirements are available through the fresh produce import health standard. But I'd also suggest that you reach out to your local biosecurity bodies to check with them to understand what help they can provide in either gaining access or establishing contact with New Zealand to explore new access, as I know it is a key focus for the New Zealand government. We work with clearance agents here in New Zealand to help assist with things like assist with the customs clearances and MPI requirements. So you can also reach out to us here at Emg Marketing, and we can provide assistance around that. It's once product has been shipped, it will arrive in New Zealand. It has to go through a transitional facility and then be inspected and cleared in New Zealand, as all fresh produce is considered to be of high risk, a high biosecurity risk for New Zealand. These are things that need to be considered when shipping to New Zealand, because we can't receive the goods until MPI have released them to us. Finally, I'd just like to touch on one of the things that Rohan mentioned to me is a lot of growers are interested in how payment and stuff is arranged in New Zealand. Here at Emg Marketing, we have a range of arrangements depending on the relationship that we've had in the past, the level of comfort the grower has with us and the level of comfort we have with that grower. They can range from, we have many of our long-standing relationships, the grower sends to us and we pay them in full 2 weeks after arrival. But in newer relationships or relationships where cash flow is important, we do have arrangements where deposits are paid on receival of a full set of documents, i.e. the invoice, phyto, QDEC and Seaway bill, and standard terms around deposits are usually 30 to 50% on receival of the docs and the balance 2 weeks after arrival. In terms of with the issues around freight, we find that the best scenario for us out of the Pacific is for the growers to provide CIF terms, as many of the growers already have shipping arrangements for other commodities coming to New Zealand. Where we can't get those, we will buy on FOB terms, and we work with the likes of GVI Logistics here in New Zealand to secure us freighting options for sea freight. They'll also help provide us with options for air freight. That concludes my presentation, Glenys. Thank you all for your time today, and if anyone's interested, I'm more than happy to share the presentation with Pacific Trade Invest to distribute amongst the attendees.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very, very much, Jade. So much information packed in your presentation that we're kind of trying to keep on top of the questions that are coming through. So please stay with us for a couple of minutes. If you don't mind, I'd like to put a few questions to you, if that's okay, that's coming through.
No problem.
So the first one is around COVID. How is COVID changing the trade landscape for Emg Marketing?
It has provided numerous challenges. I run a team of about 7 or 8 people. Primarily, we'd say they were market traders. We actually spend most of our time working on logistics now. we have had to use, traditionally we did a lot of our large commodities as sea freight. We have had to start to utilise other avenues for bringing produce to New Zealand in terms of utilising the air freight options, which is also challenging as well, because as we have COVID outbreaks, the likes of in Australia, they start restricting the flights. We've also had to branch out and really look at where the commodities are grown that are approved for New Zealand, because we've had to reach out to other countries that we haven't traditionally worked with to bring product in to ensure continuity. And ensuring continuity has been very difficult. There was an article yesterday in the in most of the major newspapers about the price of grapes in New Zealand. That's purely a consequence of the freight and shipping delays in the west coast of the United States. So it has had a very big impact on our international programs.
Thank you, Jade. There's a question that's coming through on whether or not your company handles seafood.
No, we don't handle seafood. We're only fresh fruit and produce. We don't do frozen. It's all fresh.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Another question around you had a slide. If you wouldn't mind just pulling up the slide on where you listed product. Yeah, that one. So just on this, in yesterday's presentation, MPI highlighted the fact that the Pacific Island countries have a whole list of approved, market access approved produce, and not all Pacific Island countries are exploiting that full list to the fullest, and are only using a fraction of their approved commodities on their approved list. Some of the commodities approved on those lists include those listed here. What would be your message to Pacific Island countries? Could you just highlight, I know you touched on it in your presentation, but just to kind of reiterate, around the seasonal window, do you see, would you say this is a value proposition where Pacific Island countries should give serious consideration to the seasonal windows that present itself in New Zealand, and factoring that into their business proposition, if you know what I mean? So it's just, if you could just talk a little bit about that seasonal window.
I think for many exporters in the fresh game, it very much is a thing where you have to factor in the seasonal windows. Even now, our largest trading partners, the likes of Australia and the United States, a lot of the commodities that they do are only for particular windows. You take courgettes, for example. Fruit fly is an issue for Australia. So we have a period which they term winter window where courgettes can be bought into New Zealand, and it's only limited to about 3 or 4 months. Limes, we've done lime programs for years out of the United States, and it really is an October through to mid-January program. So if there's growers if there's growers out there that are in some of the countries in the Pacific that have limes as an access point and have that top window, that could be a really valuable trade to them. And the Pacific countries that are supplying us now, the likes of Tonga don't supply us all year round with products. They supply us the products when they're out of season in New Zealand, but through establishing a good trading network and building the commercial consistency and quality over time, the programs are significant, where we're sea freighting many containers over a reasonable period of time. And we will work with the growers to, it's not that we want you to take all the risk, we will work with the growers to help with forecasting, planning, to make sure that the product that does arrive in New Zealand is able to be sold, and sold for a profitable position.
Thank you, Jay. That's really, really useful. And I'm sure the listeners this morning, those registered online, will take your advice under consideration. I don't see coconuts listed there. Do you trade?
These are the ones, there's lots and lots of products already coming in. These are ones where I know that is the demand for these products far outstrips the supply. things like coconuts and even taro to a degree, pumpkin, that they are all reasonably well catered for. There's still room for supply for sure, but
so
these ones here are the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. So the likes of ginger and chilies, we don't, probably Pacific Island countries can't compete with what you currently have in the avocado range. But for things like ginger and chilies, what sorts of volumes are you talking about here? Just ballpark. Well,
it really does come down to how they're coming into the country. If they can compete with the value of some of the countries that are already, you've got China and Thailand, who are the big major suppliers who send sea freight containers of ginger. But with the sea freight rates out of Asia at the moment, it's closing the gap. There's nothing to say that New Zealand couldn't be importing multiple containers every month of ginger into New Zealand. It's quite conceivable if the price is competitive. I know we've had ginger in the past and still do have ginger coming in from Fiji, and the quality of the ginger grown is very good.
Okay. There's a question here on, can Jay please elaborate more on the varieties of taro and eggplants and the types of chilies?
I think the best...
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's quite a different question. I know on the chilies, cayenne here is very popular as a mainstream chili, but then there's also a real... chilies are a very niche product. So the ghost chilies, the bird's eye, all of it has a place in the market. And especially in the winter when New Zealand's obviously very cold and a lot of that production is grown in New Zealand in hothouse, there's a good opportunity to grow, especially the cayenne for New Zealand. Eggplant is a little bit more difficult. Obviously the black varieties, like I think, is it one of them called Black Beauty, I think is what's grown here. Although it's always very hard to know what the varieties are, as I'm not across the domestic, 100% across the domestic market, but you want to be growing comparable to the New Zealand market to meet the window, because with something like eggplant, you're looking to replace the missing product in the winter months in New Zealand. Taro, pink taro outstrips white for sale in New Zealand by 5 to 1 when we bring it in. There's still demand for white taro, but the pink taro really does have the consumer's eye.
Is a consumer preference, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Just one last question, Jay, if you don't mind. This is on certification. So you mentioned in your presentation how important it is for growers and exporters to consider or take into consideration or have the minimum certification, HACCP included or GAP, right?
Yes.
What's coming through, not only to Pacific Trade Invest, through our office, we're receiving this in feedback from our clients across the Pacific that with COVID and closed borders, it's become so hard. In fact, certification is almost impossible now with closed borders, where you have certified assessors unable to go in country to undertake those assessments to then, carry through for them to obtain their certification. So I just mentioned this, and I'd be interested to hear your comments, whether you've also heard this from your any discussions that you're having with would-be or new clients, either from the Pacific or elsewhere. Again, a COVID-related question.
I think it is, and it always, even before COVID, compliance for a lot of the smaller nations has been very difficult because the auditors are not based locally. When I've had discussions in the past, even with government bodies from various countries in the Pacific, I've always implored them to have a look at what they do in New Zealand here, where we've developed the New Zealand GAP, so that New Zealand has its own accreditation that lines up for New Zealand retailers, because that mitigates some of the need for some of the global certifications. I haven't come across, obviously most of the countries we're dealing with are very large and are probably the borders outside of New Zealand, Australia in the Pacific have been a little bit more open, so they've been able to they've either got auditors there or been able to bring auditors in, because they don't have the very strict restrictions that we all have as we try to protect our people from COVID. I think it is something that would probably need to be addressed, and if we were establishing new relationships, we'd take into consideration if they'd already had accreditation that had lapsed because they can't bring auditors in. We'd take that into consideration, and we'd also take that to our customers that have these requirements for around compliance, to say, hey, we have this new supplier, they don't have the accreditation, but can we have an exemption because they've held the accreditation up until this point, and due to the border closures, they can't get the auditors in, but they will have the auditors in as soon as restrictions are eased. But I do think there's a couple of things that could help some of the people looking to trade into New Zealand. One's working with your government department to try and establish a good agricultural practice growing and food safety program in that country. That could be considered equivalent to what is in either New Zealand or Australia, but also working together as a lot for the smaller growers too, considering working as a cooperative to pool your resources so that the burden of some of the costs of compliance, because I know that's another consideration that we often hear about even here in New Zealand from our smaller suppliers, is the cost of compliance is very high, finding ways to spread and share and mitigate that.
Yeah, that's so true. And it, as you said, it applies in New Zealand, and it also applies across many of the Pacific Island countries. Jay, I don't know how much time you can avail us this morning, but if you don't mind, I just have one more question for you, and that is around some of the challenges that you raised. If you, in your parting comments to the online listeners this morning, what would you list as 3 main challenges that Pacific Island countries exporters should address to allow for greater imports into New Zealand?
Logistics, globally, logistics is the biggest. In fact, possibly now it's an advantage for the Pacific, because the freight seems to still move reasonably freely. The providers there have done a good job, but logistics is the number one. You've got to be clear about how you're going to get your product. It's one thing to have the product, you've got to be able to get it to market. The other challenge is the compliance factor, not just the food safety compliance, but also making sure that when you're growing in a commercial fashion that aligns with the biosecurity requirements of New Zealand and meets the MPI requirements. So establishing early on what those are and working with the biosecurity bodies within your country would be ways to mitigate that. And the other one too is the scale. Like, it's fine to have a little bit, but having a volume that avails itself so that we can bring it in consistently, because there's nothing worse for the New Zealand consumer than giving them something and then saying, no, you can't have it for an extended period of time. Like that, I think one of the things that's really helped the mango market in New Zealand, like in the years that I've been in the New Zealand produce industry, the market has on mangoes grown exponentially. And I think some of that comes down to the consistency that mangoes are available in New Zealand. We are essentially 12 months of the year now. So being able to have that consistency for especially those products where it's not seasonal is really important.
Where the mangoes coming from at the moment, Jay, into New Zealand?
Probably the four big ones are Ecuador, Peru, Australia, and Mexico. So there's three out of the Americas and the Australia. And the interesting thing about mangoes is consumers there's a range of consumers for it. So you think the South American mangoes in New Zealand are very much a commodity product. Like, you can buy them from $1.90 or $1.49 to about $2.99. The Australian mangoes, much bigger, sweeter, softer melting flesh, like the Artuita or the KP are the two main varieties there. They command retail prices of around $6 to $7 each. So it really comes down to the attributes of the mango. There are a small amount of mangoes currently imported from Fiji, and Thailand and India have also dabbled in the market. But I know when I went through this list that mangoes are a commodity that a lot of the Pacific countries have a import health standard and access to New Zealand for. It's just that it's not well utilised.
The mangoes that you mentioned from your importing countries, goodness, that's a long ways away, right? So I just can't help but think about the freight and the logistics costs involved in those commodities coming from so far away, and the opportunities that the Pacific Island countries perhaps could give some consideration to, like you said, closer market to New Zealand. There was a question around market sampling. Does MG Marketing get into that area of helping or assisting or taking on market? The word just escapes me. Promotion for new produce coming into the market.
It's not something that it's not something that we normally get into. Are you talking about establishing for new market access?
Yes,
or
yes. Yeah,
it's not something that we've done a lot in, and it'd be the only reason really is that MPI have been working through updating the import health standards for a long period of time, and new market access, there hasn't been many products that the new market access has been given to.
Yeah,
I think if those with products that they want new market access can be patient, I know there's work going on currently that in the next 18 to 24 months may see the opportunities change where market access is opportunities for market access will improve. And I think working with talking to MPI first about wanting to bring the product in, and then we're happy to work. We do a lot of work already with MPI now, so we're happy to work with them to help.
Yeah. So for example, I was thinking more in terms of, so if there is a commodity already approved on a country's approved list,
yes.
say, just take melons, for example. So watermelons from Tonga, absolutely wonderful, coming in, hitting the New Zealand shelves already. Other varieties of melons, say, for example, if another Pacific Island country were to come to you or us or some other agency and say, look, we've got a beautiful range of this species of melons, whether it's rock melons, for example, and they haven't entered the market as yet. If we came to MG Marketing and said, hey, look, here's some samples of rock melons from, say, Tuvalu or Fiji or Samoa, would your company take that on board to say, okay, we'll test this in the market, we'll do some sample testing?
Oh, most definitely, provided there's an import pathway for it. Most definitely. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm just looking through the questions again, Jade. I don't think there's any more we can throw your way. Vanilla, is there is vanilla on your list? Sorry, not on your list.
Unfortunately not, no.
Yeah.
No.
There's a question that came through about vanilla. We have a few vanilla producing countries in the Pacific. But anyway, look, Jade, thank you very, very much for your time this morning. Absolutely. We're just so fortunate to have someone of your caliber and representing MG Marketing. Some very, very useful information you've shared with us. And I'm sure those online will agree that for many of them, I'm sure this is the first time they've heard a lot of your messages. So thank you. We will circulate your PowerPoint presentation and your email contact to all of those online yesterday and today, if that's okay with you, and direct any other questions that come through to you, if that's all right.
Good as gold. Thank you very much.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very, very much, Jade. Thank you. Just bear with me a second. I'm just going to check whether we have our next presenter online. I'm going to go offline for 30 seconds. Okay, so we're in the process of lining up our next presenter, only because we're ahead of time for, and we'll take a short break for about, let's see, about 7 minutes. while we contact the next presenter. As I said, we're in this situation because we're ahead of time. So we'll come back in about 5 to 7 minutes, folks. Thank you. Hi, Raul. Gautam, are you there? Gautam? Gautam, are you there? Can you hear me? Ivy, is he trying to log on? Hi, Jade. If you're still online, I see a lot of people asking for your email address. So maybe while we're waiting for the next speaker, you might want to just put that up on your screen now. Oh, Gautam, you're online. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yep.
Okay. So good afternoon. Just give me a sec, Gautam. I'm just going to line myself up as well. Okay. So that was a really, really useful presentation and very, very informative presentation from the two presenters this morning, Raul on marketing and Jade on distribution of fresh import and distribution of fresh produce into New Zealand. Our next presenter in this session 6, Gautam Kishore, will take us through logistics, documentation, freight and associated costs. Gautam represents EIF International New Zealand in their business development and as their business development and relationship manager. Good afternoon and welcome, Gautam. EIF International is one of many freight forwarding agents in New Zealand with presence in a small number of Pacific Island countries. EIF provides logistic and freight forwarding solutions for SMEs, which can be a daunting exercise for startups, let alone for established businesses. Transport costs, clearance documentation charges, customs clearance costs, warehousing, distribution, when added together can burn into our operating costs. Gautam will talk us through freight solutions for your business, understand intercoms and Incoterms and where the risk sits across the buyer or seller divide. He will also share export case scenarios and other pertinent information. Welcome, Gautam. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. The floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gautam Kishore, and yes, Glenn has said, I'm the Business Development Manager for EIF International. We are a freight forwarding company based in New Zealand, Australia, and 2 offices in Fiji. And we are providing freight and logistics solutions to many of our clients, both from New Zealand into the Pacific Islands and from Pacific Islands into New Zealand and other regions such as other international regions. And thank you, PTI, for giving us this opportunity to be part of this seminar. And hopefully we can share some information to help these customers out. Okay, just briefly on EIF. EIF is a 100% owned New Zealand company. It was set up 17 years ago by our current director's dad, Bob Land. This business is owned by two sisters, Joe and Anne Mary Land, and they have been operating for the last 17 years. The point of difference of EIF compared to other freight forwarding companies is we have a we call it dedicated account manager, who basically handles all your shipment. So different companies have different ways of handling customers. Ours is totally different. We like one customer, one account manager to handle the customer, so they can provide proper service from scratch to the end. So that's how we operate. Our other key point of difference is our communications is paramount to seamless service, and our quality staff are all handpicked and have long-term industry experience to provide solutions and service we provide to our pride of our company and further on. Okay, who we are, our approach. So our business is an extension of our business, which end by assisting your success is our success. The scope of service we offer currently is, so we offer sea freight. You can see it's variety container size, so we move container loads, flat tracks, open tops, which is mostly used for heavy machineries, vehicles, project cargo, LCL and LCL consolidation. So we also move small volume of cargo. So if any person who has small volume, let's say a pallet size, and he or she doesn't have a container load, we can still move it. LCL consolidation, what we mean is we pack our own containers to all the Pacific Islands. So that includes Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, Solomons, Vanuatu, PNG. So we have our own container packed for these islands. So anyone who has small container loads, we can always pack and ship it for them. They don't have to wait for the full containers before it's been shipped out. We provide door-to-door tracking of consignments. All paperwork and customs clearance are handled in-house. Fast pickup delivery, so we provide pickup and delivery service. The type of container you have can determine how you will be able to organize your freight to make the most use of space. So the people who are working in our warehouse, they have a lot of experience, and we basically pack in a way to minimize space, and also we pack in a way so that your container, you don't waste space. So we always communicate with our suppliers and with customers to make sure that if we're sending a container, it has to be full. The next service we provide is EIF, is air freight. So you can see it's consolidation and direct airline. We provide air freight services from all over the world into New Zealand, and from New Zealand into the Pacific Islands, and vice versa. So we also provide service out of the islands into New Zealand. The advantage of air freight is it's time sensitive, but looking at current situation, which is because of COVID-19, airlines are not operating. So the rates has really skyrocketed, but still we can provide service. High value cargo. So this is the reasons why we use air freight, is because your cargo is high value, it's a dangerous cargo, and plus it's a perishable. So this all need to be moved faster so that you can process it and you can use it in your business. The next service we provide is called 3PL warehousing. Okay, so 3PL warehousing is a modern day warehousing. Not a lot of people know about this. So we have experience pre-COVID, businesses used to own a small warehouse, right? Because at that time the rent was cheap, the business was operating well, and the shipments was coming on time. But after COVID, what we have seen is a lot of people or businesses have given up renting a warehouse, because number one, the freight rate has gone high, right? They are not able to accommodate cost. Labor cost has gone up. This other cost, which is increasing daily. So 3PL warehousing, what we do is we can pack your containers, we can unpack your containers, we can store goods for you, we can pick and pack orders, we do your stock reporting, and we can distribute on your behalf within the region. So what happens is you really don't need a warehouse. You can stay home, you can do your sales, you can bring orders, give it to us, and we will do all the job for you. So that will basically help you reducing your operational cost. You don't have to hire a forklift, you don't have to hire a staff. You really don't need anything. Just need to focus on your sales and getting orders, while our company can, or company like us can help you with your running around. Okay, so this is just a brief of our warehouse. This is our current new warehouse, which has about 22,000 pallet position. You can see how this warehouse has been set up. So this is all cargo sitting in our warehouses for 3PL. The customers can be anywhere in the world, but they can operate from there. They can be home. And what we do is once we receive the order, we pick an order for them and we'll deliver to their clients. So this is how our warehouse is currently at the moment. And this is how we pack for our clients. Okay, the next we're gonna discuss is key players in exporting supply chain. So I understand that a lot of companies and suppliers, they export from Pacific Islands into New Zealand. So we're gonna discuss what are the key players to make sure that when your goods arrive into New Zealand, there is no restrictions, that you are able to clear on time, which includes customs clearance, biosecurities. So every party which is involved in a supply chain plays a major role. If one party made some mistake, then that means the whole channel cannot be processed. So from the supplier, from the grower to the receiver, which is the final customer, everyone can be successful if every party in between follows the right channel. Okay, requirements for import and export into New Zealand. You can see these are the requirements. If you are importing into New Zealand or your customer is importing into New Zealand, first is we call it New Zealand customs, right? So there is certain customs formalities that needs to be followed, which is we're going to discuss on the next slide. MPI, which is the Ministry of Primary Industries or New Zealand Biosecurity, and the most important is shipping documentation. So if all this falls in place, that means you are doing it right. If it doesn't fall in place, that means there's something going wrong. Okay, so New Zealand Customs, in order to clear your shipment. So if you're sending any shipments out of any place into New Zealand, these are the things you need. First is commercial invoice. A commercial invoice will always show you supply details. That means the person who is shipping must show a value. That means value of the goods. A currency must indicate terms. Terms is the shipping terms, and also should have itemized all goods. So if there is, let's say, 200 items, all the item has to be itemized because different items catches different duty rates, or some are on agreement terms. Like for example, some are on professional tariff. There's no duties on that. So all the items coming into New Zealand has to be itemized so that the broker is able to put it under the right code. And the next one is packing list. So packing list is basically explaining more about the packaging. New Zealand biosecurity, right? So these are the requirements we need if you are getting a container into New Zealand. Full containers must have a quarantine declaration. Phytosanitary certificate. So phytosanitary certificate for fresh and frozen produce, any items derived from plant matter. So if you're sending any plant material or anything derived from plant material, has to have a phytosanitary. Fresh produce, MPI will require and will cite original copies of phytosanitary. Right, so if you are sending fresh vegetables or produce, that means a original phytoset has to be carried with the shipment. Frozen produce, original is not required. A scan will be accepted as far as it has all relevant information for MPI processing. So you can see the difference between fresh and frozen, right? The reason why frozen does not require a original phytoset is because it's already in a temperature. It's already in a frozen mode, which means if there's any kind of insects or anything, which will be basically will be killed with the frozen. But with the fresh is different, because fresh usually attracts insects and other species, right? So it has to be has to be on original phytosets. We'll also include fumigation certificates. So we need to have fumigation certificates, etc. MPI quarantine declaration. So this is a sample container declaration form which needs to be filled if you are sending a container to New Zealand. And on request, we can always send you a form, or we can send it to PTI and you can access it from PTI. So this is a sample form which has to be filled. Without this form, we cannot clear your container. Okay, now we're moving to the shipping documentation. So this is a very key area, and a lot of exporters has made a mistake, and which will usually delay your shipment. So bill of lading is basically, this is a paperwork from shipping line, freight forwarder, and will show shipping details, right? So which means it's basically shows where it's coming from, who's sending it, who's the receiver, right? And that can be used for clearing shipments. The number two part of shipping documentation is terms, Incoterms. So Incoterms is also known as trade terms, are key elements of international contracts of sale. They will tell parties what we expect to carriage of the goods from buyer to seller, and at the same time export and import clearance. They also explain the division of cost and risk between the parties. So there are three major terms which is used in modern day trade. First one is free on board. This term means that the seller delivers the goods. So in simple terms, FOB means the seller's responsibility is just to deliver the goods to the port, and the buyer's responsibility is to arrange the freight on his own cost and risk. The second term is CFR, we call it cost freight. So in this term, the seller basically provide all the service, which includes the cost of the goods, the freight, and also the other charges. So that's why it's called cost and freight. The term means the seller delivers when the goods pass the ship rail in the port of shipment. Seller must pay the cost and freight necessary to bring the goods, right? So basically the freight and other charges falls under seller's responsibility. The next term is CIF. CIF is not much difference from CFR. The only difference is CIF covers the insurance. So this is the final trade terms which is used by most of the trade companies is CIF, which means covers your cost, the insurance, and the freight. The seller delivers the goods past the ship rail in port of shipment. Seller must pay the cost and freight necessary to bring the goods to the named port of destination. Also include risk of loss and damage. So we have seen since post-COVID, a lot of companies are using CIF term because with all the delays happening in overseas ports, it's better to insure your goods so that if anything happens, at least you can recover the cost. Okay, activities upon arrival in the export country. So now you can see the cartoons, and they are explaining what are the requirements when the goods arrive from the export countries. Okay, so you as an importer, so if someone is exporting into New Zealand, for example, so the person who is receiving end, that means the importer, first of all, he needs to apply NZ importer code. So this code is a customs client code, which is used to clear all the goods. So if you don't have this code, we cannot basically process your customs clearance. If you're importing foods, for food items, you will require food safety approval. So there's another approval. So customs approval is different from food approval. So you have to apply for customs approval first, and then you need to have a food approval. I understand that a lot of commodities which is coming from Pacific Islands to New Zealand is food items, which is frozen food or fresh foods, right? Because agriculture is a major economy for many in the Pacific Island. So I would say 90% of exports and imports into New Zealand from Pacific Islands will fall under food. So the next is contact a freight forwarder agent to assist with the cost. So please always remember, do not ship blindly. It's always better to get in contact with the freight forwarder, get the costing done before you ship it. Because if you assume that, oh, this will be the cost, probably you are making a mistake. And now post-COVID, a lot of things have changed in terms of freight rate, in terms of customs clearance, charges, there's additional charges, cartage rate changes every day, currency changes every day. So you have to be pretty sure that you are taking all the cost before you're sending any goods or importing any goods into New Zealand. will be required to pay New Zealand Customs GST and any biosecurity cost upfront. Just a simple example, we have seen a lot of, because our company does a lot of produce clearance, which is frozen. We have seen a lot of companies who are importing frozen food under personal shipments, right? So they are paying GST to customs, but they are not able to claim GST. Why? Because they are operating under personal business, right? And if you like to grow in your business, the best way to do is you need to have a proper setup. That means have a company registered, you pay GST so you can claim your GSTs. And a lot of companies here are not doing it. So this is probably is a kind of loss because you really don't know that there is an additional cost, which is GST. So this is a import and supply code. Any of you who's looking to import into New Zealand, or any of you are thinking of exporting into New Zealand, please do discuss with your buyers. So this is a sample customs client code form, which can be filled and can be sent it to EI, or can be sent to us, and we can lodge it for you, and you can get a customs client code. Okay, customs duty GST. Customs duty GST, Cook Islands is part of Spagata. So basically not Cook Islands. Most of the Pacific Islands country are under Spatica, or they are under PICTA, and they fall under zero duty, but still there is a 15% GST. So I have said a part of the article from the New Zealand Customs, 2 articles, which you guys can view and see that anything coming from the Pacific Island does not have any duty, but subject to 15% GST. So in the earlier I was discussing earlier on the PowerPoint is that if you are registering a company, that means you pay GST and you can claim it back. So this is a reason it will help you out. If you're not registered a company, that means you're paying GST, but you cannot claim it. So you can see the reason, the importance of having a business being registered. Okay. Now this is a simple scenario. We are going to discuss you with 2 case studies, which our company has handled in previous years, and this will be probably everyone will be surprised to see if you do not follow proper channels. No, you're gonna get into a lot of running around. So a couple of years ago, we had a customer of ours imported watermelons from Tonga, and what the customer did, customer packaged I think 3 containers of watermelon, shipped it to New Zealand, and then flew from Tonga to New Zealand to come and clear his cargo. He was told by the authorities that he cannot clear on his own, so he needs to go back to a freight forwarding or a customs clearance agency like EIF. And so the customer worked to us and said, hey, I got 3 containers of watermelon, and if we can help out with the clearance. So number 1, the customer had no client code. To get a client code, it takes 3 days. So we had to apply for client code and supply code. Once we received the client code from the customs, so we lodged the customs clearance. So codes was applied after 3 days, clearance begins, container is cleared, and then delivered to approved facility to be inspected. You can get an appointment from MPI to inspect until after the clearance is complete, right? So there's a lot of process involved. You cannot just get the container out of the wharf and start selling it. There's a certain process, which is getting the customs cleared, pay the GST, get the container to the approved facility, get inspected. When it's all good, then you can start delivering it or start the distribution. So we managed to do that. We managed to do the customs clearance, book the MPI, and MPI inspection, which is another 2 days away. So see, we had done the customs clearance, but the MPI was available after 2 days. So it's already a week gone in terms of just getting the client code and getting the clearance and the MPI inspection. MPI comes and inspects goods. Goods are fumigated, right? And then once the goods is fumigated, we found a lot of midges in the watermelon. So after the inspection, the MPI decided that it's not good for our economy, so it was taken for fumigation. So you can see the container weight. 2 days later, results show that the bugs are problem and container to be fumigated. Fumigation organized for the next day. Container released. From arrival to the product being able to deliver to buyer, overall took 2 weeks. So you can see container arrived 2 weeks ago, but it took us 2 weeks to get it cleared because the exporter had not followed the right channel, which is getting his client his codes done, not getting the proper shipping documentation, etc. So this is not the problem. Now starts is double fumigation cost. So according to the final sets we received from the shipping country was that we have received the container was fumigated, but when we opened the container for inspection, the container was not fumigation. So double fumigation cost if the supplier has paid. Number two, there is a potential damage. You can see it's $110 per day. Then we have potential container detentions from the shipping line and 3-day delay before clearance could begin. So apart from not doing the right thing from the beginning, which also involves a lot of cost, and that cost is always added to the product. By the time the product goes to the market, your product will be higher in price. And that's the reason a lot of Pacific Island businesses or exporters have failed, is because they haven't done the homework. They haven't followed the right process. Right? If you follow the right process, you will save a lot of cost and get the cargo out ASAP and able to get to the market. Businesses here will not wait for you to get a cargo after 2 weeks because they have to run a business. If you cannot supply, they will go to someone else. And so this is some of the pictures how this watermelon came and how. So the packing was correct, but basically the right process wasn't followed. Right. Case study 2, you can see import of frozen produce from Fiji. So this is very simple. Frozen produce does not have much restrictions as far as if all the proper documentation is provided, it can be cleared over 3 days' time. So you can see our boys are unpacking frozen food from Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji. It's all basically yams, cassava, all the root crops. And yes, we come to the final presentation. So this is our EIF International. These are our contact details. If you require further assistance in importing, exporting of your goods, please don't hesitate to contact us. We are under essential service. We are operating daily, so someone will be available to help you out with your request.
Oh, thank you very much, Gautam. Just stay with us for a few more minutes as we go through some of the questions that are coming through directed at you, if you don't mind.
Yep, sure.
First question is, what would you say the percentage would be a average percentage split of your business between the volumes of fresh and frozen produce that your company deals with coming in from the Pacific Island countries?
I would say probably 75% frozen and 25% fresh vegetables, also between fresh and frozen. Yeah.
Okay.
Because we have seen, because I think it comes down to what people like I discussed now. Frozen has less restrictions and less complications compared to fresh, but fresh has better margin over frozen. So we have seen a lot of, because people don't want to take risk, so they are getting more frozen over fresh.
Yeah. And the frozen volumes that your company is clearing and distributing from the Pacific, is a lot of that going into the formal or informal markets here in New Zealand? Okay, just a small thing. So we do customs clearance, but we don't get involved in distribution. So we can help with customs clearance. We do not do aftermarket, so we're not involved in the distribution. But as far as we know, to our knowledge, between 1 to 10, I would say 9 is informal and 1 is formal. Yeah. Yes, you're correct. You don't get involved in distribution, but even be that as it may, you still have, as an importer and through your warehousing and the logistics that you help out with, you do know where, to a certain extent, where those those produce and those containers are heading, right?
Yeah.
So you answered the question. So you're saying that for your business, your company, the volumes of containers that you handle and help clear coming from the Pacific Island countries, every 1 out of 10 is aimed at the formal market, and every 9 out of 10 for the informal market, correct?
Totally correct.
Okay, all right. All right, there is a question around, it says here, if I may read it, if you don't mind.
Yep,
For
sure.
processed packaged products being sent from a Pacific Island country to a fulfillment, I think it is, location in New Zealand for the purpose of fulfilling online e-commerce orders that will be delivered locally in New Zealand and internationally, is a New Zealand importer and supplier code required?
Okay, yes. So anything which enters New Zealand commerce has to have a importer and exporter code. And so yes, so anything which, so it's very simple, anything which is entering New Zealand commerce, and for us to proceed with clearance has to have an importer and exporter code. Unless if your goods is below $1,000, it will be cleared under, we call it simplified entry. But if it's coming for commercial purpose, maybe a couple of times you can clear under simplified, which is below $1,000. But if it's entering our commerce, it has to be cleared properly so that we can get it into our system. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I hope the person who posed the question has received the answer he or she is sought. There is another question. It says, if I am importing an item from a country different than a manufacturing country, which country is considered when calculating import duty? For example, I am importing an item from Singapore. The product is manufactured in the US. Will the duty be charged as per USA or Singapore?
Okay, it depends the state of the good. So if the state of the goods changes in Singapore, then we will basically, that means the goods status has changed in Singapore, we will then stick with the Singapore's requirement. If the state of the good does not change, then we will go back to the country of origin. But for that to prove that it's coming from USA, then you have to provide more supportive documentation. So putting an example, for example, if you're getting a garment from India and goes to Fiji, right? Then Fiji prepares into a final, let's say, a t-shirt. So now the product has changed from garment to t-shirt. So the duty will attract on the t-shirt, not on the garment. So it also depends on what is the final good. If it's a raw material and put into a final good, then it will attract the final good, not the raw material. So we have to look into what kind of good it is. Yeah. So if someone can say what is the good or what kind of goods you're looking at, then we can specifically look into it. But if it's any good which is changing its state, then whichever country has changed the state, that country's rule will apply.
Okay. I mean, for me personally, that dealing in trade, and that makes sense to me. I'm not too sure whether that makes sense to the person who asked the question. However, feel free to contact our office, and we'll work with Gautam, and others to answer your question again in fuller if so require.
Yep.
Also, another question to you, Gautam. To apply and import a code for the client, do we apply online or custom officer at the country of origin or from New Zealand Customs?
Okay, you cannot apply online. You can apply, yes, you can also apply online yourself. If you have supportive documentation, there's a generic email address for New Zealand Customs, and you can just fill a form and send it through with your proof of identities, and you should be able to get a code. But freight forwarders like us can assist in terms of getting the result faster because the systems we are using is linked to New Zealand Customs, so we can lodge it, and probably within a day or two we can get your client code. While you yes, doing it yourself probably take some time, because of course there's a workload which is going and everyone is working remotely at the moment, so that may also hinder your result.
Okay, you talked about phytosanitary and the importance of phyto and having those correct documentation, such as phyto certificates. MPI, correct me if I'm wrong, but they introduced an e-phyto when COVID hit. Is that correct? And then how does that, has e-phyto alleviated some of the challenges around original documentation in your experience?
Yes, so e-phyto has been introduced by MPI to help with customs import clearance, right? Which is acceptable. That means previously it was, if you have an original phyto, then you can start customs clearance. But with e-phyto, you can start, so with that you can start customs clearance, so you don't have to wait for the original to come. But any fresh produce coming out of any country still needs to come with the original phyto sets. And that original copy has to be sent by the country of the export, which is, for example, if it's coming from Fiji, the MPI Fiji Biosecurity has to send that e-sets direct to MPI New Zealand.
Okay.
Because people can't play around with the documentation, and that's the reason it has to be linked between Biosecurity Fiji and MPI New Zealand.
Well, I'm sure there's not hope that sort of business practice going on, so I'm sure everyone's above the board and try their best to do what
so
is
that's only for fresh. The frozen it's always been phyto set, so there hasn't been any problem, and the practice was always been there for frozen. So yeah,
correct. Yes. And the last question, if you don't mind, Gautam, there's I mentioned I asked you the question about your volumes coming in and hitting the formal and informal market, so that's prompted a question for some explanation, and whilst I'm happy to answer it, I'll put it to you as you have the floor. If you could just provide from your perspective what you perceive as being the informal market in New Zealand and the formal market. So just some explanation around that I think would be useful for the person who asked the question.
Okay, so so I'm going back to basically agricultural products or frozen food, right? So when we mean informal market is there's a lot of personal importers who bring, or a family is taking a container in an island and sending to a family in New Zealand. What that person does is he clears a container under personal use and then does door-to-door sale, which means either that person sells that produce from home, or he can go to a fair market or a flea market or a Saturday market in Otara, Otahu, Papua, whatever. So that becomes, that informal market does not enter our commerce. It is entered into our personal consumption. And that informal market doesn't have proper packaging. So it's like, for example, the photos I showed you about the frozen container, you can see these bags are in 20 kg. A customer of a formal will never buy a 20 kg. He will buy a 2 kg or 1 kg pack of fruit of produce, right? So we have seen that a lot of island businesses or personal businesses are focusing on informal market because it's easy. You go sell, get a cash flow in. While the formal market, getting into the formal market is a long term, and it has its own advantage. But to start into the formal market, there's a lot of costs, such as right way of packaging, labeling, barcoding. You have to have a what do you call it? Proper documentation. You have to have your expiry dates. So there's a lot of costs which is involved into the formal market, and there's a reason with that cost some farmers or exporters are not able to cope with. So they have just moved into informal market because it's easy. Just pack, sell it, get the money, and it has been repetitive. The other disadvantage a lot of informal customers have said is they have no one who can help them to get into the formal markets. They're like bigger players who wants to be middlemen, and for them to make money through middlemen is not enough. So for them, it's easy. They send it and there's no one involved, sell it to the market, to the informal market, get the money, and they're done. So,
that's true. So for in New Zealand's case, it would be safe to say that the majority of customers in the informal market are the Pacific diaspora, correct?
yes,
So the Pacific Islanders living in New Zealand
yes,
who receive fresh and frozen, mostly frozen bags of commodities from their home countries.
yep.
I think we've answered the question more than enough, Gautam. We just have one last one, and we're going to have to call this session to a close. This is a question around online registration for client code. Do we need to be a company that is locally registered in New Zealand?
Yes. So in order for you to apply client code, you need to be registered in New Zealand. New Zealand business. It has to be a New Zealand business.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gautam, for your time this afternoon, sorry. I'm sure those online have learned a lot, hopefully, from the examples and the case studies you were able to share, and some of the important information around, documentation and freight and the types of assistance that your company can help with. So thank you for joining us. We're always a pleasure to have EIF come on board alongside us on our Path to Market webinars. This is not the first time for your company, and we certainly look forward to keeping in touch with you. So thank you, Gautam.
Okay, thank you, Glennis.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to our final session of our webinar series. This session 7 will provide you or share with you some information about some in-country support administered by Business Link Pacific, and we're very, very pleased to have Richard join us this afternoon representing Business Link Pacific. Richard is the Banking and Finance and SME Sector Specialist with BLP. Welcome, Richard. Wonderful to have you with us, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Kia ora, Glennis, and hello, everybody. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko tumuana te tangata, ko tinana te waka, ko tau matamahoi te maunga, ko tangonge te wai, ko te uri o hina ngā marae, ko te rarawa te iwi, ko pokipoto te kāinga, ko Richard Busby tōku ingoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora tātou, everybody, and thank you very much to Glennis and the team at PTNI for giving us the opportunity to speak today and to whai kōrero on the BLP program. And thank you, Ivy, in anticipation of the slides. So if we could move on to the first slide, thank you very much. So who are we? Business Link Pacific is a private sector program funded by the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, or MFAT, now supported by Australian DFAT, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and delivered by DT Global. DT Global has been involved in international development for over 50 years with global programs covering almost 100 countries, with headquarters in Washington to cover the Americas and regional offices in Madrid and Adelaide to cover European and APAC programs. As a result, the group has close working ties with major bilateral aid agencies such as USAID, European Aid, DFAT, MFAT, and so on. BLP is now into its 5th year of operations and assists SMEs in 8 countries to address gaps in their business and pursue new opportunities, create and safeguard jobs, take advantage of new technology and digital transformation, access to local business advisory support, and adapt to a post-COVID economic environment. At the heart of the program is the core objective, which is to support SMEs by improving access to quality local business advisory services to improve operations and promote job creation. Business advisory services are primarily aimed at skills transfer or professional business advice. The program acknowledges that these services are important and the very foundations and building blocks for today's SMEs in becoming tomorrow's commercial enterprises and exporters. BLP also works in concert with a range of in-country partners such as local chambers of commerce and industry, BLP business service managers, who in the majority of cases sit on the local chambers of commerce and industry, peak and industry bodies and agencies, New Zealand Posts, and a wide range of other private, NGO, and public sector organisations. Next slide, please. Here we see some of the latest impact figures for the program as of 2021. The program has assisted almost 5,000 SMEs with business health checks, business continuity plans, and in-depth diagnostics. A key part of the program is the subsidising of advisory service costs, and to that end, we have approved almost 950 subsidies, while leading to the creation of an estimated 800 new jobs, 52% of which were filled by women, noting that gender equality and social inclusion, or GESI outcomes, are another key aspect and deliverable under the BLP program. Of interest is the fact that during the peak of COVID last year, we were approving up to 100% subsidy costs, which was up from the normal 50% ceiling, which benefited almost 130 SMEs. There are currently a little over 130 quality approved BLP service providers across the 8 countries, and this network is growing. Next slide, please. Here we basically set out the contents of the next few slides, which looks at BLP services in more detail, the competency assessment process, and the new finance facility. Thank you, Ivy. The advisor approval process is relatively straightforward, and like all BLP activities, is done online. So potential advisors register online. We undertake the usual due diligence and compliance checks, at which point the advisor then selects their chosen competency assessments. There are around a dozen competencies, such as accounting and financial management, strategy and business planning, business coaching and training, IT, export and market linkages, digital transformation, and so on. We have a team of 8 BLP assessors who are qualified across the various competencies, who then assess the responses prior to a final approval, which then allows the service provider to provide their services into the local market and tap into the subsidy program. Next slide, please. The business diagnostic tool aims to uncover the main business area needs of the SME and is offered by in-country partners and business service managers. It's undertaken with the SME on a one-to-one consultation basis. Next, please. Here we see an example of just one of the questions. The tool is relatively very simple. It's an online form which gives small business owners the opportunity to, I guess, step back, critically think about the future of their business and the likely advice that they may need. It therefore helps them to uncover perhaps cracks in their armory from which solutions or strategies can be developed. Next, please. The business health check is the first step for the business in identifying what professional advice they may require, and which then allows them to tap into the 50% subsidy service. It helps business owners detect potential problem areas in their business and provides them with a list of specialist service providers who can help them with the appropriate solutions. It can be undertaken holistically or specifically to one particular business discipline. It also includes an export option, which under the revamped BLP portal and website will include a more thorough questionnaire based on PT&I guidelines. This has also included input from EIF International and a logistics and freight forwarding company, and of course, great to see you on board as well here today, Galton. The input has also assisted with our impending export readiness tool. Next slide, please. The business continuity planner takes the SME through 8 key areas of consideration in reviewing the business, which has become of greater importance, of course, during COVID-19. As with all BLP services and tools, a summary of findings and results and/or a report can be generated, which the SME can then print out for future requirements and for ongoing activity and action purposes. Next, please. And here we can just see a simple example of a question set, which in this case is associated with personal welfare, which in most cases is a very simple yes and no response. And so it's, as I mentioned before, very user-friendly to navigate and complete, while the overall tool also enables the business to take stock and review their overall resilience levels. This is a key area of concern for all SMEs, particularly during these challenging economic times. Thanks, Arnie. The Pacific SME Finance Facility represents a next phase of the BLP program, which was launched in late 2020 and which has seen a scaling up of activities and a significant and progressive budget lift between November 2020 and December 2021 to now almost $12 million. There are 3 phases and 4 focus areas or deliverables under this phase of the program. So first and foremost are the adaptation grants. We've now completed 2 rounds with over 800 applications submitted in round 1 and 2,000 applications in round 2, which has just recently closed. And we would be expecting to disperse around $3.5 million under both rounds. Depending on the size of the business, SMEs are awarded grants ranging from between $15,000 and $5,000 and $15,000, while round 2 was also very happily underwritten by Australian Department DFAT. We also have a component of Wholesale Capital. The design focus in this area looks to provide no-cost capital to partner financial institutions or FIs for on-lending at concessional interest rates to SME borrowers. We are pleased to say that we are close to finalising the first of several bank FI partnerships this month, after speaking with some 30 banks and FIs across the Pacific over the past 12 months or so. The initial envelope is kept at $2 million with a goal to work towards a proof of concept deliverable, which will hopefully see this phase of the program continue beyond the initial pilot phase. The facility also comes with a risk sharing component, which provides an opportunity for banks and FIs to share in the risk with BLP, thereby reducing the overall risk profile of the transaction, which thereby improves their overall lending appetite, hopefully. Next, we also have a component of technical assistance or TA under the budget, which has already seen the engagement of a number of external consultants to the program under various scopes of work. You'll normally find that TA is a normal component of most development programs. We also have an added tool, which is the Finance Finder or the Financial Marketplace, which also allows lenders to upload, to publish, and to showcase their SME loan products into a central portal, which enables the SMEs to compare loan product offerings in one central platform, while also enabling the SME to engage directly with the lender through that portal. The PTNI monthly Pacific Business Monitor has also provided context to our program, as it supports much of what we are finding through grant applications, for example, which talks to poor cash flow, uncertainty around how long the crisis will last, and how long borders will remain closed. Also, we are finding under the grant applications that many SMEs require financial support, access to new markets, a review of their financial position, while many are looking to pivot or diversify their current offerings. These are also key business needs picked up, of course, by the monitor. It would be, I guess, an understatement to say that cash flow has become strained for most small businesses, which has consistently topped the monitor, and the July wave, of course, was no exception, with 86% stating that it was their #1 challenge. Given the landscape and the financial stress and uncertainty, it also makes it virtually impossible to review and provide some form of credibility around forward cash flow projections and underlying assumptions. A mid-year 2020 BLP survey also found similar challenges, while all of these aspects are clearly shining through on many grant applications, while our ongoing discussions with the banks and the FIs has also uncovered startling levels of loan defaults and stressed portfolios across the region. However, we are finding that even with the smallest grant envelopes of around $5,000 are doing wonders for many SMEs, for not just survival purposes, but to also enable them to adapt, to pivot, to diversify, and to hopefully come out the other side stronger and better for it. So it's all about building resilience and building back better and stronger. We believe, therefore, that BLP is well placed to assist on the supply side through the various mechanisms and levers, such as professional business advice, subsidies, grant funding, and over Q4, access to low-rate concessional finance through BLP FI partners across the region. Another interesting theme that we are picking up through the grants is the migration or scaling up to e-commerce and digital-driven solutions. And I would probably estimate that at least 60% of grantee applicants are looking to steer their business in this direction. I guess this just follows on from the international trend over the past 18 months, where the previous system of direct face-to-face and real world meetings and contact has all but been thrown out the window. And of course, as a result, we are seeing an immense rise in new digitally driven service providers and apps coming to market. And perhaps none more so than in the banking and finance and the payment space, where open banking and fintechs, for example, just seem to be part of everyday jargon. Thank you, Ivy. A key aspect of the finance facility targets and supports SME access to finance, which constitutes a major challenge and bottleneck for SMEs. We find that a vast majority of banks and FIs across the Pacific are well capitalized and highly liquid, so it is clearly not due to a shortage of underlying capital or liquidity. The problem is the risk-averse nature of FIs towards SMEs and the perceived higher risk profile attached to the sector. This slide shows how subsidised business services to finance and accounting practitioners have assisted with SMEs to overcome this challenge when looking for new loans, refinancing existing ones, or rescheduling. Other BLP initiatives include Wholesale Capital, of course, as we mentioned, in conjunction with risk-sharing arrangements with lenders and using grants as equity towards new loan applications, which is a new initiative. And so with wraparound business advisory services, it means a fully inclusive and engaging envelope. Business advisory services aid with getting SME loan applications more loan and bank ready, which is the same concept we are applying with the export readiness feature as part of the current BLP retooling exercise, which we now have a quick look at to wrap things up. And just one comment there, despite the reluctance of, I guess, FIs or banks to lend more aggressively into the SME sector, we have started to see some green shoots and some encouraging signs from some of the lenders across the Pacific, and one that comes to mind is Kina Bank in Papua New Guinea, who have recently launched a range of innovative new loan products, which we consider to be game changers for the SME sector across the region. Next slide, please. And where would we be without technology? Well, from inception, BLP has always been a virtual program coordinated from New Zealand, and so it was not difficult to adapt to a COVID world when it hit us all in early 2020. The BLP model of structuring program delivery in country with a vast network of local stakeholders has therefore proven to be spot on, which has essentially allowed the program to continue even despite the significant challenges of COVID, which has brought many economies and businesses to a standstill. Technology and e-solutions, therefore, have always been a core delivery platform for us, which has been ably supported by our long-term partnership with Arco Tech, particularly in assisting with the design and development of online tools tailored to the Pacific environment. Arco is a specialist software development and data analysis firm that has assisted us with building a data collection and tracking system while analysing data and producing reports using the thousands of SME responses since 2018. And of course, this data is critical for us as part of the ongoing monitoring and evaluation of the BLP program, while aiding and assisting with desired developmental impacts. Thank you, Ivy. The following slide shows the success of the online tools while providing another summary of SME user access, users across both business health checks and the business continuity planner and the finance finder. The finance finder numbers are also very encouraging, given that it was only launched in Samoa in late 2020 as a pilot. It was only recently launched in PNG in August with 8 banks and FIs now subscribed, and that's growing, and only 2 banks at this stage in Fiji currently on board. So ongoing activities under the Finance Finder will include future rollout to the remaining 4 countries and full onboard, 5 countries and full onboarding in Fiji. Thanks, Ivy. And here we just get a very sneak preview of the impending launch of the new BLP Portal any day now, which will incorporate the new suite of tools around loan readiness and export readiness in the very near term. The new platform will not only continue the theme of promoting the wide range of online and local tools and services that BLP provides, but will better integrate the new services provided under the Pacific SME Finance Facility. Thank you, Ivy. And the final slide is really an example of an article from the Fiji Times of just a couple of days ago, actually, which provides a great example of the positive impacts of grants under the program, and it tells the story of an academic turned agro farmer who built a new nursery housing some 10,000 sandalwood seedlings, which can withstand Cat 3 cyclones. And this was after 2 previous plantations had been destroyed by past cyclone activity. Mr. Singh also talks about the benefits and the value of speaking with a BLP business service manager, who of course in Fiji is Mr. Ramesh Chand, and undergoing the diagnostic tool that I discussed earlier. It's a great story of perseverance, of determination in the face of adversity, I believe, and of resilience and building back better and stronger, literally. We've seen dozens of similar articles across our countries over the life of the program, including across social media and so on. And I guess that this becomes the acid test for the BLP program, and indeed any development program. That is the real world outcomes and impacts. And the last slide, thank you, Ivy. So ngā mihi nui, and that essentially wraps up the presentation. And I'd like to thank you one and all for the opportunity, and I'll hand you back to Glynis and the team in case there may be any questions or observations. Thank you.
Where there's funding, there's always questions, Richard, as you well know. But you look, wonderful, a lot of useful information there. And the topics that you've covered are just so very real. And it's wonderful to see the likes of BLP helping SMEs diversify, as you said, to be agile and to make those changes in their business strategies, coming out of COVID. It's so wonderful to see some of the examples. There's a couple of questions that have come through, Richard. If you don't mind, I'm going to put them to you now. The first one is, can BLP extend services to Tuvalu? So maybe, could you just could you just go over again the countries in the Pacific that you have presence in or work with? And then the question is from Tuvalu. Are you?
Oh, right, yes. Yeah, no, unfortunately at this point, it's Tuvalu is excluded from the program. The country membership has grown from the initial 4 to 8 now. So Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Samoa, Kiribati. Did I mention Fiji?
Yep.
Cook Islands, and Vanuatu. I'm sure that's the 8.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, thanks, Ivy. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, so those are the 8 countries. Sorry. Okay, great. Cook Islands, Fiji, Kiribati. So then how does then BLP decide countries to add to that list? Is there a formal process? And so for
yeah, look, I think
who are not on that list, what would be your advice to them?
Yeah, look, that really comes back, I guess, to the obviously to the donor. So obviously, because we are an MFAT funded donor program, aid program, it really depends on where New Zealand, the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade are looking to focus their energies under the aid program on a year-by-year basis, I suppose. So yes, so we would need to be guided, I guess, in the first instance by what their kind of thinking is around various islands within the region across the Pacific, and therefore how we may then be able to slot in into that thinking as part of.
But you're also funded by DFAT as well, right?
Well, that was interesting because obviously, as you know, DFAT and MFAT are continuously talking, and so there was obviously DFAT were very interested in what we were doing under the grants program, and so as a result of that, they found it much easier to engage with MFAT and to provide funding directly into our existing program, as opposed to going out and trying to recreate something new from scratch, which obviously is a long process. And it just made sense to perhaps funnel that through us. Yeah.
No. I understand, and it makes perfect sense in the development world, especially when you're dealing with donor funds.
Sure.
Yeah. So I guess then the question coming on the back of my first question was, for new businesses or emerging businesses or startups, or even registered businesses out there who haven't heard about BLP, what would be your advice to them? How do they start engaging with you to receive some of the services that BLP offers? What's the starting point?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good question, Glynis. And our program does predominantly focus on the formal sector. So, for example, registered business, and as we know, most governments across the Pacific have a very solid agenda around migrating or trying to transform a lot of those informal sector players into the formal sector for a whole lot of very good reasons. But we are finding that we are dealing also with a lot of, so even though we classify an SME under our program as an entity that employs between 5 and 50 employees, we are finding that there are a lot of businesses across the Pacific which actually fall in under that. So fall into the micro space. And so we are by default virtually dealing with a lot of entities like that, and hopefully helping them to migrate from being an informal, for example, into a formal. In terms of how do they interact with us or engage with us? Yeah, I guess being very our entire suite is all online, so that's very easy straight away to be able to access from, I guess, anywhere. However, yeah, we have a very proactive in-country strategy around connecting and engaging with the sector through all of those various in-country partners that I was perhaps referencing before, some of those. And we do also have on-the-ground business service managers who are BLP employees, and they are very active in the marketplace there, going around and speaking and talking, and we are forever having, we forever have communications going on around promotions and social and the media and all the rest of it. So there are a lot of ways that they can obviously engage with us. Yeah.
So just on your in-country focal points, perhaps if you could just share with those online where those positions sit, because it differs from country to country, right? So for example, where would businesses in Samoa, where would they go to and Cook Islands, where are those BLP employees sitting?
Yeah, so
located, sorry, for want of a better word, located.
Yeah. So in most cases, in most cases, we would have
We'll just give Richard a few more minutes to come back online.
So, no, sorry, that was just a minor thing. So all the most of our business service managers are actually associated or connected with the local chambers of commerce and industry. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you. Yep.
Oh, sorry, Glenn. Sorry. Yeah. So yes. So therefore, most of our business service managers are connected with the local chambers of commerce and industry. So and of course, as we all know, the local chambers are usually very, very active in the local market when it comes to the business community, both in the public and private sector, and particularly within the SME sector as well. So yeah, so they are.
Okay, so just on that point, Richard, could you just go to your earlier slide where you listed the countries? I just want to reiterate this point because for the information of those online who haven't heard about BLP. So we just want to reinforce this. So Ivy, could you just take us through Richard's slides? I think it's to his second slide.
Yeah, I think it was.
He lists the names of the countries that BLP is active in.
I think it was slide 2 or 3.
Next one. Yeah. So in the Cook Islands, for those online, BLP focal point is located within the Cook Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So with Eve and her team, correct?
Yeah.
In Fiji, the BLP in-country contact is situated within the FSEF, Fiji Employers Commerce Federation. Is that correct?
Yeah, and Ramesh Chand, who I might have mentioned briefly before. Yep, he's out on. Yep.
Okay, and so on and so forth. So with Solomon Islands, within the Solomon Islands Commerce and Industry.
John, yes.
John is there.
Yes.
Yep. And in Tonga, where does the Tonga rep sit located, Richard?
Yeah. So we've just actually gone through a bit of a bringing on a number of new business service managers across some of the countries. So they are now just going through some of their training. But they are all on deck across all 8 countries, and there are a couple of 2 or 3 new ones actually across our network. But they, again, in most cases, they are so connected to the local chambers. But of course, we can easily make those provide that information if it's required.
I think that would be I think that would be useful. Yeah, if we could share that information, unless it's already up on your website. Fantastic. The other question.
Yes.
Yeah, the other question, Richard, was around your last slide was wonderful in that it portrayed a very real story, an experience of a recipient of your grant and the impact, obviously, that's making on his business. I wondered whether you could share with us some similar examples of SMEs across the countries who have received a subsidy service, for example, and how that subsidy service has impacted their business.
Yeah, look, we have. Yeah, oh God, it's almost like, I'm sorry to be rhetorical. Where would I start? We've seen, and again, we're into our 5th year now. We've seen a lot of this type of stuff in the media over the last, we're into the 5th year now. So we've seen lots of this type of communication over that time. I really just threw this in as a last minute, actually, when I saw it. When I saw it just the other day, another one that came through, and I just thought, oh, it should be a good example just to use. Under our there are a lot of examples of this. We would expect to, under our combined grants program, we would probably be looking to disperse around 300 to 350 individual grants under that envelope. So straight away, we're talking probably a lot of good stories, which we would ultimately be able to share, I guess, in terms of the outcomes from the grants program itself. So look, there are lots and lots of examples of it. We have almost finished dispersing round 1 in total, and we're just going through the process now of reviewing, assessing, validating, so on, round 2. So the next couple of months we would also be hopeful of having paid out all those grants under round 2 as well, and then we will have a much larger war chest, I would say, in terms of stories just from the grants. But look, I'm pretty sure Sandra and our internal comms team would have a lot of examples to be able to share. Yeah.
No, I think it's safe to say, Richard, that those online are perhaps not having heard about BLP in the past will find the information that you shared through your presentation very rewarding for them, because as we know, small businesses are always on the lookout for funds and grant, whichever way they come to them. And BLP's presence in this space is such an important factor, I think. It's also good to hear, Richard, that BLP is using the PTNI New Zealand, PTNI's business surveys, monitor surveys, to influence your decision and design of your programs. And that's exactly what the survey was intended to help shape these policy responses and technical responses. So very good to see those examples coming out through your presentation. And just finally, Richard, to say that we're very, very pleased to have BLP, very fortunate actually to have you share with us on our webinar and be part of our webinar this afternoon. So thank you, thank Paul and the rest of your team back in your office, and we look forward to collaborating with you on other projects and programs of PTNI New Zealand. Pinako, thank you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Pennis, and thanks everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings to an end day 2 of our webinar. I hope all of you online have enjoyed and found the presentations of some benefit to you and your business. All the presentations, the videos, the presentations and the email contacts of the presenters will be circulated to all those who have taken the time to register and come online and join us yesterday and today. So we will be sharing that information with everyone. Just a last parting comment, as with all of these projects, we're required as part of our reporting procedures to ask each and every one of you to complete the registration form, the evaluation form, which you would have received from Ivy, and Ivy will be in touch with you as to when we need those back ASAP usually. Your evaluation forms are important to us. Please, it's only a one page. Please do take the time to complete them, as your feedback will help us in our design and our thinking of the next Path to Market webinar. And it will also inform Pacific Trade Invest New Zealand as to how we can help you if we haven't already. And I see some of those comments coming through very nicely. So thank you very much, everybody. Again, from the team here at Pacific Trade Invest New Zealand. As I said in my opening statement, we're here to help you. If we can't, we'll put you in touch with someone who can, including those who presented this afternoon. So without further words, I'd just like to say again, thanks very much for your time. Pinaka. Goodbye.